Hi, friends. Welcome back to Getting Close, a podcast about connection. My name is Aiden Wharton, and today I'm connecting with Andrew Restieri.
I do research on gay men's digital intimacy. There are like real stakes to having your nudes stolen or leaked. Who owns those photos now?
What is the biggest misunderstanding about consent for gay people?
It is like really irresponsible to talk about this in a way that like ignores those like sort of class politics.
Right. How do we agree on consent if we're all operating under different rules?
You can't.
What does healthy gay male digital intimacy look like? Before we dive in, if you're one of the 25% of people who's listening without subscribing, it would mean the world if you did that now. Subscribing means our metrics go up and we can continue to bring you incredible guests like Andrew Restieri. Andrew is a PhD candidate at Cornell. His research broadly centers on the use of digital technology to facilitate online communities, especially for queer people. His dissertation examines the online sexual practices of gay men and how those practices challenge conventional understandings of intimacy and consent. He also holds a master's from Johns Hopkins University and a BA from Northwestern. This is a fascinating episode. In it, we explore the economy of nudes that exists within gay culture, why consent online is almost impossible to define, the uncomfortable question of who actually owns a nude once you send it, why digital intimacy and real-life intimacy may now be the exact same thing, the surprising reason why some men get sent unsolicited nudes and others don't, and the real question behind every app interaction, which is, what do we owe each other? If you've ever taken a nude, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Andrew.
Hi, Aiden.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Getting Close.
Happy to be here.
I don't know why I whispered. That was new.
Yeah.
So we're going to start the episode, like every episode,
Okay.
with some connection questions.
Love it.
You are going to ask me one, and I'm going to ask you one. Do you want to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, great.
What is something you think everyone should do at least once in their lives?
Oh.
You haven't read these questions already?
I have, but I forget that. I try to really have them be
it feels a little unfair,
creative.
but you've had time to think about this.
No, what? Drag.
Oh, yeah.
I think everyone should do drag.
Yeah.
Like full, good,
Yeah.
someone else can do it.
Not like shitty drag.
Yeah.
Like real drag.
And really, even women and all the non-binary folk, just get in the heels,
Yeah.
get the wig,
Yeah.
really feel your oats
Yeah.
because it does change you. What is something you find difficult to discuss with your family or friends?
Oh my goodness. Difficult to discuss with my family or friends. I think I feel really fortunate that I'm on the same page. Like the obvious answer here is politics and values and what's going on in the world. And I feel really fortunate that everyone in my inner circle is on the same page about it. It's actually, honestly, I think one of the hardest things for me to talk about is actually my work, is my research.
Honestly, I was hoping that this was the question you would get because it's a great segue.
It's a great segue because it is I'm so in the weeds on it and I think about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And people have such great questions about it. And then I sometimes get caught off guard by those questions and have a hard time. And it's actually really helpful, honestly, when people who aren't in the weeds on it ask me these questions, because it makes me go through the exercise of putting into words what it is that I'm actually doing and why I'm doing it.
So what a great segue. What exactly are you doing?
That's a great question. So I do research on gay men's digital intimacy.
Oh, this would be such a good episode.
I'm so excited to talk about it with you. I became really, I arrived at my PhD really interested in studying online communities, how people in general, but especially gay men, navigate sort of digital worlds and ecosystems, be that on Grindr, but also be that on Instagram or on Reddit or wherever else you can, on Discord, wherever else you find community online, how how gay men and other queer people sort of carve out space for themselves in those worlds. And that was those were the big picture questions that brought me to my PhD. And then a couple years in, I became really interested in talking specifically about sex. In response to some discourse that I saw online about revenge porn and about nude photos and consent and sort of a messy back and forth discourse that I know you're really familiar with. And I became really interested in like how this discourse like plays out differently among gay men than it does among other people, among straight people. And so I started asking sort of the same really open questions about like how digital technology like facilitates these kinds of things, but specifically in the gay male sexual context. So my research is all about how gay men's intimate practices online sort of challenge conventional understandings of consent, of privacy, of intimacy, stuff like that.
And there are so many avenues. Like, to me, that seems like such a overwhelming yet exciting area of study.
Yeah.
Because even, I think, so we came into each other's orbit because I wrote a piece about close friends.
You wrote a piece about close friends.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even, I hadn't been following you at the time, but a friend of mine had reposted it and was like, I think this is so interesting because close friend stories are this, this, and this. And you had done research because you had done like a poll. And
I love
was
a
like,
survey.
okay, researcher. And so I was like, this is so interesting. This guy is doing like exactly what, like is tapping into exactly what it is I'm interested in. So I reached out to you. And it turns out we had met many years prior, famously at Marriott Theater's
Lincolnshire,
production of,
Footloose.
Footloose. But that's another story.
Yeah. And it, again, like we are now in the thick of it in a very different way where there's so much in my sphere, open relationship discourse and then unsolicited nudes discourse. But I think I want to go back to your research. What is the most surprising thing that you've learned so far?
I honestly, so I came into it really expecting to learn about how gay men in their like liberatory queer sensibilities are tearing down the sexual establishment and saying like to hell with the heteronormative rules because we're gay men, we like to have sex, and like there are no I was expecting sort of that sensibility and the responses I got about you know, this is different from how straight people do it because we get to have fun and there are no rules here and whatever. And I think what's been really surprising about what I've found is that it's like really been like riddled with rules and expectations and sort of constructions of consent and privacy that you can argue are maybe rooted in heteronormative histories of those terms, but maybe just like adaptations of them rather than like complete departures from them.
What is the number one rule that gay men obey in digital online spaces?
I would say the most like unanimous rule that I heard from folks is that they would never include their face in their nude photos.
Okay.
That like crosses a line. Obviously, that's not the case for everybody, but there was sort of this contradiction in folks that I've talked to between talking about that sort of liberatory queer sensibility that like, I don't care if my nudes leak, you know, everyone's nudes are out there. I'm not running for president. Like, who cares if my, like, and also like sort of a shared solidarity with other queer folks who have their nudes out there. You know, if my nudes leak, someone else's nudes are going to leak, you know, like we all have each other's nudes. So I'm like not that protective over them. I got a lot of folks saying like, I'm not protective.
Right.
And my face isn't in them. And I like use the album feature on Grindr that makes it so you can't screenshot. And, you know, I limit how many people can see them at once. So you are taking steps to protect yourselves because there are sort of rules of decency here. But what you're saying is you don't care.
Right.
And so like that sort of tension is a lot of what I've been reconciling with recently.
And I wonder if that stems from a protection sense of like security, because I'm like, well, yeah, if my nudes get leaked, like it's whatever. Although my nudes have been leaked and stolen. And it was a really violating experience both times. And I know plenty of people whose nudes have also been leaked and it is so violating. And so I wonder if that's just the language that we use to make it okay, because also sending nudes is like a very common way that we communicate now.
For sure. I mean, it's a people call it the gay male handshake.
Sure.
That like you just like fire off your nudes. Sometimes you do it we can get into solicited versus unsolicited.
Oh, baby,
but
we
you
will.
Have like, so, you know, I have seen many people's nudes. Right. Many people have seen my nudes. You know, it's like, it's, you know, it's this sort of economy of nude photo exchange that is so pervasive in the gay community, and yet there are like real stakes to having your nudes stolen or leaked or whatever, and there's very real consequences of that. But like the way we talk about nudes and our behavior around, you know, how protective we are around our nudes, like doesn't necessarily match.
Right. And because there are so many different ways to send nudes, and the article that I wrote, I was like, nudes can be sexual, nudes can be platonic, nudes can be encouraging, nudes. I mean, I feel like close friends is also the main way that I think about them, which I didn't realize because in the piece that I wrote, I was like, unsolicited nudes, XYZ, XYZ, XYZ. And then a lot of people were like, yeah, but on Grindr, it's different.
It's different.
And it is true that like the rules that we have are different depending on platform. And so it is really hard to find a single definition of
Well, so that's what
consent.
I'm saying, is that because there are rules, first of all, right? And they're different across context, because so a lot of people will say, oh, I would never share someone else's nude photos. Like that's disgusting. Except for I'm at a bar in Hell's Kitchen and I'm with all my friends and I'm like, oh my God, look at the dick of the guy that I'm hooking up with. But they'll say, well, that's different from like screenshotting it and sharing it. And I think my argument is that is different. Like it's a different thing, but it is still sharing someone else's nude photos without their consent, without their knowledge. And that person may really take issue with that, or they might like not care at all and they might think it's hot. So like we have to have space for all of these different conceptualizations of consent and privacy, because there's no one way to think about it.
And I think too, like they've just changed so much. Like I feel like if you looked at the same person 10 years ago to today, the existence would be totally different, and like how they entered into gay sexuality. And I think the internet is such a big part of queer sexuality across spectrum. Like it is so integral in many of our coming out processes, because that's where we learn, right? Through chat rooms, through forums, through whatnot. And so much of queer sexual identity and intimacy already started on the internet. And so it's like my, first boyfriend was long distance, and I was like, okay, Snapchat, whatever. And so it does just become this like really ingrained habit and pattern. So do you find that there is a difference between how we express intimacy digitally and in person?
I don't find it helpful to distinguish between those two things. I think increasingly it's one and the same. Like I think like digital technologies are part of the fabric of our lives.
Right.
And using gay male communities as just one example, like it's really hard, I think, to separate the in-person social experience from the digital social experience when you think about like who's in your close friends stories, or who you're even group texting with, or who you're talking with on Instagram or Snapchat, on Grindr or whatever. I think it's all sort of interwoven, especially because a lot of the platforms we use are geospatial, right? Like, so Grindr and Sniffies are like tied to where you are physically. So those are sort of like hybrid digital in-person platforms to begin with.
Is fascinating too, because I hadn't thought about the difference in how they present, but I was talking to the CEO of Sniffies, and he said that having a visual map and having the knowledge of where each person is in relation to you actually makes you have a much more community sense than just the grid of Grindr, which I thought was totally fascinating.
Yeah, I think the other like key difference with Sniffies is that you can use your nude photos as your profile image,
right?
Which is yet another way that you're putting your nude photos on the internet with or without your face, right? But in a way that's like tied to your physical location, which like feels really precarious in all of these ways that would probably mortify straight people, but are like totally fine and expected with us.
I mean, when I was home in Hawaii, this must have been, I guess it was during the wedding, which is, I will clarify that I was just like, I'm curious to see like what Sniffies looks like. Maybe it was the trip before the wedding. I don't know, but I was like, Casey, let's figure it out. And it was so interesting because I grew up in a very rural area in Hawaii, and the ability to see, oh my God, there's a profile, there's a profile, there's a profile, there's a profile in this remote space, which is totally different than here's a profile on a grid that is X amount of miles away.
And you're also touching on the rural versus urban thing, which
Sure.
makes a huge difference in all of this because obviously, like we're in New York City and folks use Sniffies and Grindr, of course, very liberally in places like this. But in a lot of folks, in a lot of other places, this is like how gay men meet each other. And
Sure.
this is like, oh, like there is, there isn't like, there's not 12 people at the, this public restroom.
Right.
And in this, high foot traffic area, there's one. And like, that's like a really exciting prospect to someone.
Right. So would you say that the hookup apps like Grindr and Scruff and Sniffies have forever changed gay male intimacy?
Yes and no. I think it's hard to say no,
Okay.
right? I think because they've become like such a part, they've become like sort of woven into the fabric of gay male intimacy. But I don't think of it as like Grindr came in and disrupted and like changed gay male intimacy.
Right.
I think of it as gay male intimacy like changed as
Sure.
society changed, and Grindr was a part of the tapestry of that, and then Sniffies is more newly a part of the tapestry of that.
Right.
And Scruff and Hinge and Tinder and all of these other digital platforms are part of that story.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine who I'd say like 10 years older than I am. And he was talking about the difference of pre-Grindr times versus post-Grindr times. And he was saying that the number one thing that he has observed is our desire to identify ourselves by our sexual positions. He's like, now it is such common behavior for someone to be like, I'm a top only, I'm a bottom, I'm a power bottom, I'm a strict top, I'm a dom top, I'm a soft dom, I'm a etc. And he's like, that didn't happen before Grindr.
Well, yeah, I mean, reducing your sexual identity to like a drop-down menu is definitely like part of like platformized culture, I would say. But I also think like I've talked to a couple of older folks for my research who, were having sex before the proliferation of Grindr. And I like sort of tried to get at this question, and a lot of them were really dismissive of it. And they were like, gay men were having casual sex before Grindr.
Right.
They'll have casual sex after Grindr. They were like, this is just a new way to find it, that like it's more accessible than it ever has been. It's easier than it's more sort of commodified and,
very
capitalist than it ever has been. But I think it gives Grindr like a little too much credit. To be like, oh, like this thing came in and changed everything. Like, I think if it hadn't been Grindr, it would have been something else. And gay men have always been finding ways to, have casual sex.
Well, I mean, and I feel like the newest version is close friends.
Yeah.
Right. So now there is this like strange existence. And I remember when Casey and I had the conversation, I was like, do we turn close friends into like what it is for everyone now? Because it used to be just a fun place for your close friends.
Yeah.
And now I feel like the rule on Instagram is someone follows you, you follow them. You like a few of their photos because that's the most visible way. You add them to your close friends, and that's like fishing.
Yeah.
Right? But close friends is not consensual.
For sure. I mean, and some guys do like those consent checks where they say like, do you want to be removed from my close friends? I frankly like never even respond to those because I find them embarrassing. And I'm like, I don't even want to let you know that I watched this, which is probably my own thing that I need to unpack. But yeah, you get added to someone's close friends without them asking you.
Right.
And then it's like tantamount to someone sending you unsolicited nudes, right? It's like it's nudes appearing in your Instagram feed without you necessarily sign it. You didn't just subscribe to that person's OnlyFans, right? Like it's they added you to their close, and then you ask, and like generally, of course, they'll like say yes if you ask to be taken off. But maybe that like has some risk to the to the social relationship, and you don't want to damage it.
And I think it does, which I think the consent checks on close friends are sort of bogus because I have never seen someone say no.
Yeah.
And so what I tell people is I'm like, if you actually want to do that, say, respond to this story if you want to stay. Because then all of the people who see it and don't, like then the onus is on you and you're the person who put them on the close friends in the first place versus putting the onus on someone to be like, hi, this actually makes me uncomfortable. But we don't have the language to sort of say that. Yeah, it's just like so strange. And I think that was sort of my misstep on the article that I wrote is that I meant it about Instagram, but I wrote about it writ large, which like Grindr does just have different rules.
Yeah.
And have you found that there are different rules for different types of people on Grindr?
Yes, is the short answer.
Right.
I think there are different and different folks that I talked to sort of talked about it differently, because there are certainly guys that I talked to who were like, I would never send an unsolicited nude photo. I think that's disgusting. And there are other folks that I talk to who are like, who sort of do it but feel shame about it. Other folks that I talk to who do it and don't feel shame about it. And they're like, it's a way to get someone's attention who I feel like is out of my league. And, you know, like, and so it's sort of like a power play of trying, you know, this person would never respond to me like unless I send my unsolicited nudes. Meanwhile, that person might be like, I'm not going to respond to you because I sent you you sent me unsolicited nudes. So I think the nude photo, and I mentioned it as like an economy previously, and I think it's kind of a helpful framework to think about it as like your nude photos are like an entity of value. And that value is like determined by how other people, you know, what they're worth to other people.
And is it treated in the same way that we treat things of material currency? Like gold is valuable because it is rare.
Yeah.
Does that same thing apply to nudes?
Hypothetically, right? Like, because when then a celebrity or influencer nude leak happens, and frankly, when like a really hot person's nudes leak, and like or like a real, you know, those nudes become like a thing of value, and those are all like, you know, loaded with, you know, class and race and body type and all these other things of like how we ascribe value to male bodies differently for different people. But there are all these different ways where a nude photo can become more valuable, and then it becomes like an exchange, and then you go have those forum sites where people are like, I have this person's nudes, I'll trade them for this person's, you know, like, you know, and it becomes a whole a real economy of the naked male body.
Right. And it feels like in that context, it's about access. Yeah. Because I know a very large amount of people who had their nudes leaked on a specific forum. And I remember I had photos on there. Pretty much everybody that I loved had photos on there. But what was worse than the photos was how the people were talking about them.
For sure.
And how the people were making assumptions based on character and making all these stories and using code, because you weren't allowed to post about certain celebrities. And so they would use code and ask and cross-reference carpet patterns. And I just remember thinking like, this is a very strange way that people are trying to get access to something that, like, this feels very non-consensual. Because there is no way to sort of fix it.
Well, it's this question of when does the consent process sort of stop? Because if I say like, can I send you my nudes? And you say yes, and I send you my nudes, who owns those photos now? You know, because I don't have them anymore. And so now you have them.
Right.
And so like, what are the politics that like, so what's the ownership of those photos? Because now they're something of value that you possess that you can then exchange for something else that is of value that you want to possess that someone else might have.
Right.
And so then you get into like, so I consented to this one exchange, right? I didn't consent to further exchanges, but am I even allowed to, you know, stake that claim when I've already let them out into the world?
Right.
And of course we want to say yes, because we don't want our nudes, you know, posted on forum sites or on Twitter or like wherever else nudes end up. But there's like a real complicated sort of messy thing of like, am I allowed to tell you that you're not allowed to show my dick to like your friends at a bar when it's on your phone? And like that, have I relinquished some of my power over my own body? I keep knocking your microphone, I'm sorry. By sending it to you in the first place.
Damn. That is a great question. Do you think the answer is yes?
I think inevitably the answer is yes. Sure. Like, because it is just out of your control. And like, what do I think it should, like, you know, we can talk about what should and should not be the case, but I think you have to be prepared for whatever happens when you send someone else your nude photos. And that's what I'm talking about when I say guys talk about, oh, well, I'm not running for president, it's not a big deal. But then what happens when your nudes actually leak? And
then you decide to run for president.
And then what if you do decide to run for president? We need a gay president.
We do. And I think it gets back to just how complicated consent is.
Yeah.
And something that we talked about a week ago in regards to the discourse around these unsolicited nudes is that we don't have the same definition of consent. None of us do.
None of us do.
And so how do we agree on consent if we're all operating under different rules?
You can't. Like, I hate to be
sure.
like,
okay.
Like, I'm not going to sit here and advocate and say like, when my book comes out, it's going to be like, these are the rules of gay men's consent, like as I think they should be. I think that's an impossibility because we all come to the table with different, lived experiences and expectations and comfort levels with sharing our nude photos. What I am an advocate for instead is, sort of holding space for each other's boundaries and for each other's like lines of consent, and not what I see that is troubling is people saying, oh my God, like I would never send unsolicited nudes. Like I'm not a slut. Like, like that's disgusting. Like, ew. Like I think that is different from it's not my thing.
Sure. And I think like something that we talked about a year ago, which totally changed my perception, which you briefly touched on, was how different, if we're talking about it as currency, gay men who have more social currency use their nudes differently than gay men with less social currency. And I think that is something that cannot be discounted in how we talk about it, because these platforms have really consolidated how we look at class and race and masculinity and femininity.
So there's all these studies about this, about like the gay male obsession with hypermasculinity.
Sure.
And like the proximity to heterosexuality that's implied with that.
Okay.
And like the jock trope in porn and all of these things, and like, the obsession with fitness and the like hypermasculine male physique.
Right.
And top culture and like whatever. I think it is like really irresponsible to talk about this in a way that like ignores those like sort of class politics, because not everyone in like I have friends, and I'm sure you have friends similarly, who maybe have like followings on social media or something, who are like, I don't send nudes.
Sure.
And who like just don't do it. And guess what? They don't have to, because they're really hot and because they have social media followings. And so like they've made that calculation of like, oh, like I'm at higher risk because I'm like a public figure, and like, things might, even if you have like 10,000 followers on Instagram in the gay community, you might be a public figure in the sense that someone will go to those forum sites and look for something. But also if you're really hot, then maybe you don't even have to toss that line, because people will come to you regardless. And that's what I was talking about with folks who feel like, maybe they have to send nudes to get someone's attention. It devalues certain bodies and values other bodies in ways that are aligned with like histories of oppression that I think we all find really problematic, but all continue to participate in every time we like ignore one person's nude photos and solicit nudes from another person.
Right. And then it becomes this complex web of how you communicate with people and what your communication says about you to them and about yourself. Like when I was on tour and traveling a lot, if I didn't respond to some people, they would ignore it and it was fine, or people would get really, really upset. And then I would try to engage in like a communicative way. Yeah. And that usually didn't ever go well, but I tried.
Well, it's this question of what do we owe each other?
Oh, I love that question.
Because this actually happened to me, I want to say like a year ago.
Okay.
I didn't respond to someone on Grindr, and I do my PhD at Cornell in a small town, and so it's like it's a pretty visible Grindr grid.
Right.
Like, it's like it's the same people.
Is your face in your Grindr profile?
My face is on my Grindr profile. And I didn't respond to someone who reached out to me like 3 or 4 times, and I never responded. And I saw him on the bus, and we made eye contact, and he walked past me, and then he like yelled at me on Grindr and was like, why do you feel like, why would you like make eye contact with me on like, I know you saw me, and you like don't have the decency to respond to my Grindr messages. And it really made me reflect on like, do I owe every person who reaches out to me on Grindr a message?
Sure.
Am I owed a response by everyone that goes both ways, right? Am I owed a response? How do I feel when I'm not responded to? and like what are the like expectations of decency? Because, and this is what I'm talking about our rules are different for each person, where I like don't really mind not being responded to. Like if you don't respond to me, I'm like, okay, you're not interested, like we can we can all move on.
Which I also would just add is also partly reflective of the currency that you have as a gay person.
Completely. And that's what I'm saying, is that these rules manifest differently for different people in different bodies. And that's why it's like such an impossibility to come up with like a comprehensive set of rules that we can all hold each other accountable to.
Right.
Because we all want different things from each other, and we all.
And it's like, what do you think, you being like the person who's sending the thing, a Grindr message means? Is it eye contact? Like, I'm trying to reflect it as, what does it look like in person?
Yeah.
Because if you make eye contact with someone, that is not necessarily, that doesn't have to be reciprocal.
Completely.
Like, you can make eye contact and look away.
We were on a public bus in a small town.
Right.
You know, I make eye contact with a lot of people on that bus, you know, like.
It's honestly one of the reasons I stopped using Grindr is that I didn't like that it affected the people that I then saw.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh, I know he sent me a message and I didn't respond, and now I feel strange.
And that's part of like the weird sexual politics of gay men to begin with, is this like these blurry lines between friends and sex partners. And one person wants it to be a sexual relationship and the other person doesn't, but maybe still wants to be friends. And like, how do you like walk that line when that person sends you nude photos or whatever?
Which I will say, in the past like month, I have become much more visible on the internet in a much clearer view, I will say. And the line has become much less clear to other people. And I have like really perfected the, thank you so much for supporting my work.
Yeah.
This is not a direction that I am comfortable with, and I would appreciate it too. And what is interesting is that it has never been solicited by me, right? I'm like, if somebody, for me, like what I owe someone is dependent on the length of the message.
Yeah.
If somebody says, hey, 6 times, there's nothing there. If somebody sends me like a paragraph about my work or my writing, or just like a kind paragraph, I'm like, that shows me that you took the time, and like, I would love to reciprocate that intention. And very quickly, and this is just on Instagram, it goes sexual. I'd say like 25% of the time, maybe 50%. Okay. Like, it's like a big percentage.
Definitely.
And it's funny because I'm like, I do want to keep being the kind person. Sure. And I like don't want to be a dick, because also like I was raised being very conscious that I am handsome, white, tall, charming. And I love my friends from high school. Hey, Marina. Hey, Becca. Hey, Mary. Who like made sure that I like didn't become a dick.
Yeah.
Right? Because they were like, we're not going to let that happen. And so I think I have a lot of empathy for that. And so like my biggest fear is being rude.
Yeah.
And yet it does become tricky because people take that as an opening. So what does healthy gay male digital intimacy look like?
What a question.
What a question. I have some like must hits here, which I was like, this is also a new thing.
I think it looks like what I talked about earlier, of just like holding space for each other's boundaries, and like acknowledging, like knowing where yours are, and like being patient with where other people's are.
Right.
And if they're different from yours. Like if I like don't want to get dick pics in my Instagram DMs and you want to send them, I think that's great for you. And I'm not talking about me specifically.
Right. The proverbial you.
The proverbial you. Like if that's an incompatibility, then like then we can find other terms to move forward in this relationship that are maybe not sexual, or maybe are sexual, just aren't on Instagram. You know, like there are like plenty of different permutations of that.
And I think in terms of patience, for those who have more currency, which I will say is like white gays, to have more patience, because I think that too is where we keep increasing this class and race divide and sort of femininity divide, is it becomes, oh my God, this person won't stop sending me pictures, and we don't consider the lived experience of the other person. It
reinforces the like existing class difference, that of being like, oh my God, this guy's like so annoying or whatever, he won't leave me alone. and you can have and it speaks to the whole thing of like you need to be nice to people who you don't want to have sex with,
Right.
which is like a constant and very valid criticism of gay men like across the board is there are like ways to connect with people that don't involve like wanting to have sex with them, and there are ways to connect with them that do involve having sex with them
Right.
in like all sorts of different ways. Like maybe that person wants to have sex with you but like doesn't like sending nudes on Instagram, like
Right.
that's also really cool too. So like it is just a level of patience and understanding of
And
you know
care.
and care and acknowledgement that we're like all sort of in this together, and not like rushing to generalizations about
Right.
people like, oh, this guy's like one of those, or like, you know, having patience and holding space for different sorts of I've started talking about consent in the context of boundaries,
Mhm.
and I've really enjoyed that because it makes it feel a little bit more personal, and it makes it feel a little bit like this is where my line is, this is where your line is, and like sometimes those lines are aligned, sometimes they're not, and that can all be okay.
And then when they're not aligned, how do you revoke that consent?
Yeah.
Because again, it is so easy to engage in the sexual. And when I did my close friends survey last year, there were a large number of people who have people on their close friends who they would never have sex with in real life.
Completely.
Some might say that that's leading people on. Some might say that that is just how we exist. But I have even found myself where I'm like, oh, am I giving the wrong signals if I'm flirting with someone who I don't have intentions to hook up with?
But that's even what I'm saying about these boundaries is, what does it mean for you to put someone on your close friends to begin with?
Sure.
Like, is your close, for some people, their close friends is a list of every gay man they've literally ever met.
Yeah.
And like people have, 1,500 people on their close friends or more. And like, it's, they've never even met. They live in
Right.
different cities, like, and it's just, and who knows if you're going to have sex with them. And
Right.
it's just like, and then for other people, it's like a smaller and more curated list. And then for other people, it's, people who you actually want to have sex with. For some people, it's like your friends from high school, and like, it's
Right.
not sexual at all. And like, it's mostly women, or like whatever it is.
I have a dear friend, Wyatt, if he's listening, who lives in San Francisco, who his close friends was like 1,500 people. And this was like a couple years ago, but he would do these like fun little surveys.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
honestly, a big part of why I started doing surveys
Yeah.
is because I was like, oh my God, these are so fun. And I look forward to being able to answer these questions and engage in this conversation.
Yeah. So like that, and so this is what I'm saying is that the close friend story like doesn't have to mean one thing to everybody. Like whatever your close friends is, and you just have to have a conversation with folks when like you're on someone's close friends when you don't want to be, and
Right.
vice versa.
And again, it comes back to how we communicate online versus in person, which is so tricky. And again, I think I know the answer for this, but now that we've had this aspect of the conversation, what is the biggest misunderstanding about consent for gay people?
I think that it's one thing.
Yeah.
That you know what it is in the first place.
Right.
That like,
And so if somebody's listening who say this is the first time they've thought about it, what would you say is the best way to sort of think about how they would want to label their own consent rules?
I think about it like boundaries to start with, and think of like what feels good to me for like my sex practices and what my online intimate practices. How, like, do I like to have my face in my nude photos? Do I send nudes unsolicited? And that's not judgmental about any of those practices. Like ask yourself non-judgmental questions, and it might be helpful to think about those questions in relation to your perceived boundaries of your group of friends, or of what you might understand like the larger gay community's boundaries to be, which, as I've talked about, that's not one coherent thing, but understanding them relative to external boundaries, I think, is really helpful in sort of shaping them. And like the more that you can like really coherently understand where your lines are, the easier a time you'll have communicating them.
Yeah. And so I feel like a lot of this conversation too has delved into the difference between how important it is to have digital intimacy and online. That's the same thing. Digital intimacy and in-person intimacy. And you have said that there's sort of like doesn't feel like there's a huge difference. But because we do live in this tech world that we're in, what are like some like lovely digital intimacy spaces? Like I'm thinking about like the gooning community or like camming, and there are these ways that queer people have access to each other that wasn't always a possibility.
I think, by the way, I wouldn't dismiss spaces like Grindr as toxic as they've become. Yeah, I said to you, when I say that I study I put that I study digital intimacy on my Hinge profile,
Uh-huh.
and it gets a lot of attention on Hinge.
Of
It's like the
course.
most frequently responded to prompt on my Hinge. And half the time it's like, oh, this is so interesting, let's talk about it. Half the time it's like, give me a fucking break. Like, that doesn't exist. You know, what an oxymoron. Digital, you know, you can't have both digital and intimacy.
Interesting.
Or have you found out like why Grindr killed gay sex, and like how, you know, like people have like really negative
Right.
associations with
Well, now I have to ask the follow-up.
yeah.
Do you think Grindr killed gay sex?
I don't think Grindr killed gay sex. I think, first of all, gay sex is obviously not dead.
Correct.
And second of all, like there, you know, there are like broader cultural trends, and there's the pandemic and how we've all like sort of become more internal and like and more online. That's not Grindr's fault. That's
Right.
like a whole host of cultural factors.
And I think we also can't discount the prevalence of PrEP. Like
For sure.
for the past 10 years now, we live in an entirely different sexual landscape
Yeah.
that we sort of can't separate from the rise of Grindr and the rise of sniffies.
Yeah, definitely. And I think digital intimacy can like take whatever form you want it to. Like, I think, you know, it like Grindr is like a really powerful tool for facilitating sexual connection. Certainly if you like don't live in like a super gay part of the world, or even if you do, like, do you know how many friends I've made on Grindr? Like, it's,
Yeah,
and
same.
intimacy can mean friends,
Yep.
you know, like it's there are all sorts of ways that we can like leverage digital tools to like to facilitate community both online and offline. So
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily like a delete Grindr proponent, unless you feel like that's what you need to do for your own journey. I am a proponent of like thinking of digital tools as like part of a toolbox,
Okay.
of like a diverse toolbox of like ways that you can connect with other gay guys,
Right.
both online and offline. And because the ultimate goal, at least often on Grindr, is to like meet up in person, right? That's like
And that goes back to the CEO of Sniffies when we were chatting last summer. He said, my goal is to get you from first chat to in-person hookup as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And digital tools are like a really powerful way that you can make that happen.
Right.
Going to bars is also a really powerful way that you can make that happen. And like, you know, going to, you know, all, you know, queer spaces, you can go to speed dating, you can go to Fire Island, you can go to like wherever you want to go to like make connection with gay men happen. But you can also go to Grindr and Sniffies. So I think it's, I caution against like the use of Grindr sort of passively, and as like your only means of having sex and like your only means of trying to connect with other gay guys. But I think it's like a powerful and useful tool, and digital intimacy can be wrapped up in all of that.
Mm-hmm. Before we get to the question bonanza, I would also be remiss if I didn't sort of pick your brain about the way that these apps are still technically designed to keep us on platform.
For sure.
I think about this much more with Instagram, and even in the last month, right? I've been much more intentional about growing my platform in Instagram. So I'm on it much more.
Yeah.
And I can feel my relationships combined with sexuality, combined with this compulsive addictive thing. Have you noticed that addictive or compulsive behavior in the research that you've done about intimacy?
This happened to me. I did it myself. And this is like a whole other thing about how I like research my own sort of community.
Sure.
But I was on Grindr like a couple weeks ago here in New York. And I was staying at my mom's house, and I had like was not going to hook up with anyone,
right?
Because I was like staying with my mom, but I was like talking to guys on Grindr,
of course,
and it like wasn't going anywhere because I was like, I'm not going to hook up with anyone,
right?
But I'm just bored, and so I'm just like on Grindr, you know. And I think that is what I would say, for me at least, I'm trying to like pull away from is the sort of like passive, unintentional, like sort of like couch rotting that you do on these apps, where, you know, you like wake up and you're like, oh, let me like see what my Hinge notifications look like, and, you know, you fire off a hey, how's it going, and you know, like, I'm not saying get off of them, I'm saying like use them when you're like trying to use them, you know, like you open Grindr when you're like looking to meet somebody, or like an open Hinge when you're like, look, I don't have plans on Thursday, like let me like see if I can like meet somebody, and like, so use them, but just use them like intentionally.
Okay, now into our question bonanza. Fuck, marry, kill.
Okay.
Grindr, Sniffies, and Scruff.
Okay.
Grindr, Sniffies, and Instagram.
I think in that case, I have to fuck sniffies.
Obviously.
It feels like low-hanging fruit. I'm deciding between the other two. I think I'm gonna marry Instagram and kill Grindr.
Fascinating.
Just because Instagram is a little bit more inclusive of like my not gay community.
That's fair. Yeah.
And so marriage, I think, might be like I may be thinking of marriage as part of a bigger life picture. So that's my answer, but don't hold me to it.
Do you think we are flirting better or worse than we were 10 years ago?
Probably worse.
If you could, how would you fix Grindr?
Oh my God. I would get rid of those stupid ads.
The game, Clash Royale.
Clash Royale, saving the king from the like Tetris situation drives me crazy. And
especially because that's not how the game works.
No.
That's not the game.
Paid Grindr, by the way, is so expensive.
Is that a business write-off for you because it's research?
I'm working on it. Maybe. But it drives me nuts.
Yeah.
So frankly, I think we would all be having a better time on Grindr if like the user interface were just cleaner and more intuitive and flowed better and you weren't bombarded with ads.
It's crazy. What is a green flag in digital intimacy that you see and think like, okay, that person.
Like being unafraid to be cringe.
Yes. Be cringe, everyone.
Cringe. I am like big on embracing cringe lately.
Yeah.
That's been my like 20. Well, because I'm single also.
Great.
I'm single. And I've been big on like embracing cringe in my own dating journey.
I was listening to I Feel So Untouched right now. And it took me to like a pop 2000s movie soundtrack. Yeah. I was like, God, these songs had so much heart and emotion that like pop music doesn't have now.
I know. It's like coy. It's like
we've lost it.
I know.
This question I'm taking from Tim Ferriss, and his version was, if you could have a billboard somewhere, what would it say? Mine is, if you could send a text message to every gay person, what would it say?
Touch grass.
Excellent. What is your favorite book that you have read in your research?
In my research, that's a great question. I think the one I'd recommend, like, to the widest audience would be a book called NSFW by Susanna Pessonen, who's like a leading scholar on online porn. And there's two other authors who I'm forgetting, who I'm mad at myself for forgetting. Ben Light is one of them. And
it'll be in the show notes. It's called NSFW, and it's about sex on social media. And it really unpacks the label of NSFW as and what that term actually does in terms of implying the sexual content is unsafe. Like, what are the politics of that? Right.
And the workplace, saying it's like not safe for the workplace is like has a lot of like really weird expectations about what the workplace is,
especially because the workplace has changed.
Has changed a lot, as we all know, and it's obviously like not inclusive of sex work, which is like very real work. So I found that book really helpful in unpacking some of my own.
I can't wait to read it. And now our final three. What is something you're feeling curious about right now?
Ooh, my sister just got a puppy.
Cute.
So I've been, and he's like so precious. He's like adorable. And so I've been sort of pet curious.
Okay. When you are feeling down, how do you find connection?
It's like sort of a touch grass answer, but it's that like I call someone.
Yeah.
I'm again embracing cringe. I like love picking up the phone.
Good to know.
And I know some people are like, ew, like unsolicited phone calls, and they hate that. But I love picking up the phone. And frankly, it's not always. Sometimes I call my mom, and I just like want to talk to someone, because getting a PhD is like a really isolating thing, because I spend a lot of time at home. I spend a lot of time just like in my thoughts thinking about everything that I'm doing. And so I like to like sort of remind myself that there's like life outside of my work, and that frankly that there's life outside of like gay men and their sexual practices.
Is there?
And which just is up for debate. And so so I sort of touch grass that way by like talking to another person and like having like kind of a, not necessarily surface level, but like a, you know, just
a refresh,
just like a refresh, just like a catch up conversation about what's going on.
100%. What is a recent example of community that has made you smile?
Well, can I talk about my sister's dog again?
Of course.
We've all been sort of rallying, the whole family. I feel really lucky. My whole family lives in New York, except my youngest brother's in college. But and I have a big family, and you know, she's got a puppy, and it's a lot of work, and the troops have kind of been rallied, and it's sort of warmed my heart, and like reminded me of how lucky I am with like to have the support network that I have. Like if I were ever to get a puppy or to have a kid or like anything like that, like that's you know, so I think sometimes we forget that like there are troops to be rallied.
Yeah. And I think people forget that the best way to rally troops is to ask for help.
Completely. You have to ask for it. And especially in our like insular little lives where we all work from home all the time and we all, you know, and sometimes you got to like make the phone call or send the text. And it always sort of warms my heart when, you know, someone does that and then you can like be available for that person.
Yeah. I mean, my brother just came over to help me set all of this up, and I still had to be like, oh, I'm asking for help. Like, it's an imposition.
And it's your brother. You should be able to call, you know, like, but.
So thank you, Quinn.
Thank you, Quinn.
So I know we already touched on it, but just for everyone listening again, where can they find you?
Yeah. If this conversation was interesting to you and you are interested in talking to me, either one-on-one, or if you have a group of gay friends that you can get together and we can, you know, have a group conversation, you can definitely reach out directly to me. My Instagram is at Andrew Restieri. That's Restieri. I'm sure it'll be linked somewhere.
It sure will.
My website, also andrewrestieri.com. I am very eager to have a lot more of these conversations. My whole summer is going to be dedicated to having these conversations. I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling all over the country, hopefully.
Which I also feel like there will be a lot of my platform to help you in this way. So everyone who's listening, I'll make it very easy when Andrew's ready to have these conversations.
Thanks.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, I already know you love a survey and you love to give your input. So stay tuned, and more from Andrew coming soon. Thank you so much for joining me on Getting Close today.
I feel so close.
Yes, that's the goal. That is literally the goal. Well, folks, that's all for me today. Before you go, if you could just leave a comment on this episode, it can be an emoji even, that would really mean so much. And make sure to tune in next Tuesday for a trans and cis conversation about masculinity. It's going to be really fascinating. Remember, when connection feels far away, we start by getting close.